Well, welcome back, everybody, to the Gentleman's Wrestling Podcast. I am Jesse Collings, joined as always with my co-host, Jason Ounpraseuth. First episode of 2022, and we have a lot to talk about coming off of the two Wrestle Kingdom shows. We're taping this before Wrestle Kingdom Night 3, Wrestle Kingdom Backlash, as I've been calling it. That's taking place this weekend, but we're gonna go over the two nights of Wrestle Kingdom that we have seen, and also maybe talk a little bit more about the current direction New Japan is going, how we feel about the product at this point in time, what can we expect from them in 2022, their 50th anniversary year. How are you doing today, Jason?
Yeah, doing well. We're obviously recording this before the big New Japan Noah rivalry that is getting played up in the New Japan press and on Twitter. However, the hype for it's mixed for that, and so that's why we're kind of prioritizing the main Wrestle Kingdom shows the first two nights. And yeah, I mean, Okada, he cried during his first promo. And so that's definitely always a highlight there, and shows how big this 50th anniversary will probably be, or at least how New Japan is planning on this being a big anniversary year.
Yeah, well, the thing about the Okada promo at the end of the show, at the start of the show, they aired a video from Antonio Inoki.
Yep.
And Inoki founded New Japan Pro Wrestling, obviously, and is the figure most associated with New Japan Pro Wrestling, but is in recent years been kind of persona non grata in New Japan Pro Wrestling. His run, as booker in the company and running the company ended really poorly, and it's not a good relationship between the two. And so he's kind of been absent from New Japan Pro Wrestling for years, and he's been in really bad health. He's been in the hospital. He's had multiple surgeries. It's been a really rough go of it for him. And so when he did that video, it was actually a really big deal that he would appear on New Japan Pro Wrestling programming. And I know Dave Meltzer said this. He said that a year or two ago, someone mentioned to him from the New Japan office that oh, it's going to be weird when Inoki dies because everyone in the office hates him, but we have to do something for him. Right. We have to have a memorial show or something like that. And so that was kind of the figure that he was. And then obviously Okada addressing him in his post-match promo, and Inoki in the video said that he wants to be at the 50th anniversary show in early March. So we'll see what happens on that end. But yes, Okada cried. Okada was the man during Wrestle Kingdom. I think if you're giving out Wrestle Kingdom MVPs, Okada would have to be the unanimous choice. He wrestles in the main event of both nights. He beats Shingo Takagi to officially win the IWGP World Heavyweight Championship in night one, and then in night two, he successfully defended against Will Ospreay. Jason, what were your thoughts on the two main events?
I thought they're incredible matches. The Ospreay one especially stands out, already a match of the year contender. It's usually how it goes in Wrestle Kingdom, right? It's usually one or two of the matches tends to be early front runner for match of the year. But yeah, for the Shingo match, very good, very incredible. Shingo showing off that he is, a true main eventer. His character, I think you tweeted this out, sort of the machismo of the character really stood out for Shingo, and for the Ospreay Okada match. These guys, it is interesting for the story there. That Ospreay has yet to beat Okada at Wrestle Kingdom. This is only the second match, but still, Okada tends to have a good track record at Wrestle Kingdom. And so that's kind of an interesting story to tell there. I was kind of 50-50 on that, whether Ospreay would actually win that match. Because they could have gone either way. I don't think any direction would have been wrong necessarily, but for the story there for Okada, he's definitely he's the reason he's the ace is because he has a very good track record at Wrestle Kingdom. I think he's only lost two matches at Wrestle Kingdom with Jay White and Naito, and so
he's lost to Tanahashi.
I guess post Wrestle Kingdom 10 when he officially gets crowned as the ace he's only lost twice, but yeah, you're right.
Mhm.
Tanahashi he's definitely lost to him as well. And so it's kind of an interesting story there for him. And so, yeah, I thought, both incredible matches, the Osprey one especially.
Yeah, well, I feel like at Wrestle Kingdom, New Japan tends to do like happy endings for Wrestle Kingdom, right? If you look at last year, it ends with Kota Ibushi on top. If you look at it, previous years, I guess Naito losing is kind of like a negative, but he lost to Okada, so it's not even like that big of a deal. Because Okada's basically a babyface too, even if Naito was more popular in the moment. But I feel like they tend to do like happy endings for Wrestle Kingdom. And then if they want to put a heel over, like they want Jay White to win the title or Will Ospreay to win the title, that usually happens like a month or two afterwards. But Wrestle Kingdom, they feel like they tend to focus on a babyface. So I would have been really surprised if Will Ospreay won the match on night 2. It just made more sense for Okada to win it. My take on the two matches were they're very different. The Shingo versus Okada match was more of a traditional Puro style match where these guys just going out, hitting the crap out of each other, firing up, doing like all of this hard hitting stuff and hitting the rope super hard and doing the kind of classic, strong. It's not. I mean, strong style ends up being kind of like a bastardized term to use. I mean, all Japanese pro wrestling is strong style when it's actually just one type of Japanese pro wrestling. But that kind of style of wrestling that most people think of when they think of really good Japanese pro wrestling. And then the Ospreay Okada match was more of like an AEW American indie style match where a lot of spectacular moves. Obviously, if you have Ospreay in there, there's going to be a lot of flying and crazy shows of athleticism. It's more spectacular than the Shingo match. The Shingo match is maybe more physical in a certain way. And what I really liked about it was I think you can poll different people and say which one of those matches was your favorite and get like a 50-50 split because it really comes down to individual preference. I think they were pretty much equally great. I would probably say the Ospreay match is slightly better. Maybe it was just because it had the finality of it where the first match was kind of like, okay, we still have night 2 to do, as opposed to the second match, the Ospreay match, being more of like, okay, whoever wins this match is leaving Wrestle Kingdom as champion. So maybe there was some more drama on that end for it, but I just thought they were both, I mean, like you said, I think they're both match of the year contenders. This has been an insane week. First week, we're taping this on the 7th. So we've had, 7 days of 2022. And I feel like we've already had like, what would you say, like 4 or 5 like potential match of the year contenders between like all the promotions. Just really really a great week, overwhelming week. I was talking about this off air. Just so much wrestling happened in this first week of 2022. I mean, you can start with the Puro shows on January 1st, and then you had WWE Day 1, and then you had you had NXT New Year's Evil, if that's your thing. You had both nights of Wrestle Kingdom. You have the TBS debut for AEW. AEW has Rampage tonight. We still got stuff this weekend. I think we got Impact Hard to Kill.
Battle of the Belts.
Yep, the Battle of the Belts. The third night of Wrestle Kingdom. It's a really incredible start to the year. If you like pro wrestling across the world, just a real diverse amount of stuff that's been happening. I'll ask you about Will Ospreay. How do you feel about his heel like persona and the whole kind of act he's been doing? Because it's been very divisive. Everything Will Ospreay does is very divisive. But how do you feel about like his heel character and how it fits into New Japan currently?
Yeah, just speaking on the character himself, I'm kind of on two minds of it. Like, it does come off as very cheesy and very very over the top, but I guess if that's what he's going for, it's very effective. However, I don't like, there are times where he does come off as like very a very serious type of heel at times, or just like a more traditional type of heel, I guess. If that makes sense. Like there are times where he's like very over the top. He's like doing over aggressive trash talking that he did at the end of night one to Okada. Like he's doing like over exaggerate trash talking, which I guess if that's what he's going for, that it makes sense. That's not really why I see it from as more of a cartoony type of heel. Like, I don't really think that's what should be the goal for the character, at least. But if that's what he's going for, if he wants to be have elements of cartoonishness, like very much, I mean, he calls himself the Commonwealth Kingpin, and just taking elements of the Marvel Kingpin, like, yeah, that character tends to be over the top at times as well, very unironically hilarious as well. So if that's what he's going for, it's very effective. But I don't know, like, again, like, I'm not sure what the clear direction is for the character, whether if that is what he wants to do. I don't know, what do you think about the character?
I don't think he's like a natural on the mic in this heel persona. I think a
I
lot of
agree.
it comes across like he knows he's playing a character and very forced,
Yeah.
which is okay in some realms. Like you said, it's very cartoonish, it's very cheesy, and he's coming out. I think the way he cut his hair, I think he's going for like a Logan Paul style
Yes.
look and stuff, and kind of the attitude is kind of inspired by that, or the Conor McGregor kind of thing. He's coming out in like the robe after the show. And when he first came out after the Shingo, because so Wrestle Kingdom Night 1 ends, Okada retains over Shingo, and Ospreay kind of comes out to do the little post-match angle to set up the match for the following evening. And at first I was like, okay, these guys just had this incredible, hard-hitting, like sports-based style wrestling match. And here comes Will Ospreay coming out, being this cartoon pro wrestling heel. And I was kind of like, this is really out of place and not really what I want to see in New Japan Pro Wrestling. But as he finished his promo, and a lot of it was like the way Okada reacted to it, where he was like, he waved to him and said like, "Bye, fake champ," or something like
Yeah.
that. At the end of it, I was like, actually, I'm really sold on this, because I want to see this guy get his ass kicked by Okada. I want to see Okada, smash this guy's head off tomorrow. And that, so I think it ultimately did its job. I do think that sometimes there's awkwardness that comes with him. Like on social media, he wants to be a heel on social media, but then he's like, don't say mean stuff to people on social media. You have no idea what it does to their mental health. And it's just kind of like awkward, like kind of like persona. I don't think he's totally I don't think he totally has his character down yet.
Yeah, I've always felt that's always the weakness of Osprey with any type of run, whether he's babyface or a heel. Like, I've always felt that like he struggles to really capture the character that he's trying to portray. He's always been very awkward on the mic, and sometimes there's good highs where, like, I think it was Resurgence, I believe it was. That was a really good promo from him as a heel. But then again, yeah, a couple months later, you see some mixed results after that. And so definitely there are highs when he is really hitting that character that he wants to hit. But yeah, very mixed results most of the time.
Yeah, and in like you said, and part of it's like it's just been such an odd year for him, right? We do the heel turn, he forms United Empire, he wins the title, then he hurts his back, drops the title, goes back to England. Then he's like he's in the UK and he's in the US, and he's like saying he's the champion. He's doing stuff for New Japan Strong, and he's doing stuff on the US Indies, and he's working for Rev Pro, and he's kind of away from New Japan. And then he comes back and he's thrust into this very, very big, he's the main event of Wrestle Kingdom Night 2. It doesn't really get any bigger than that. And so I think he hasn't quite developed his role in New Japan as properly as maybe he would have if it had been a more typical year where he was on every show or on most of the shows. I do think that there's a couple of interesting, well, I also want to say this. There are people out there who really, really don't like Will Ospreay. And I am not going to say you can't dislike Will Ospreay, because you can, and there's reasons to dislike him, and I don't want to dismiss those. But there are people out there who like will just be like, Ospreay's terrible. I never want to see him. His matches are bad. Like, oh, the main event was night 2 was bad. I hate Ospreay. All this stuff like that. And it's like, if you think that Will Ospreay is like bad at actually wrestling, you are lying to yourself. Like, or you just have absolutely terrible judgment, and I don't care whatever you say about that, because then that's one of those things. I was looking at, like, you know, the cage match rating for the Okada match and the grapple rating, and see like these 1-star reviews and like, I hate this match, blah, 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 fuck Will Ospreay. And it's like if we, like, you need to take a step back from what you're doing if you think that match is bad. And I understand you don't like Will Ospreay, you prefer not to see him in the main event, but to argue against this idea that this guy's not, I mean, he's one of the best wrestlers I've ever seen, ever. I think when he shows up on the Wrestling Observer newsletter Hall of Fame ballot, I think he should walk right in on the first ballot, because he's that good in the ring. I don't care about how he fits any other criteria. And so I just, like, one of those things where it's like, I was rooting for Okada in the main event because I thought the story fit better, but I almost didn't want Ospreay to win because I just don't want to deal with the stupid discourse about Will Ospreay, because it's annoying. It's full of people who I think have certain agendas that they want to push. And they might have reasons for those agendas. Don't want to dismiss that, but it's like, it's hard to find like a rational Will Ospreay discourse, because everyone is just so entrenched in him as a person, and it's become like almost exhausting as a fan.
Yeah, I mean, you certainly see that with the NFL right now, with the MVP debate with Aaron Rodgers. You know, I think there's a beat writer that said they weren't going to vote for him for MVP because he's of his anti-vax opinions. And, you know, certainly, the MVP debate in the NFL is pretty close. Like, it's not, I don't think Aaron Rodgers is a runaway contender, but yeah, definitely that is a debate amongst other writers and analysts, whether like, oh, is that really a valid opinion to like not vote for some of our MVP because of an outside the field type of thing. And yeah, certainly same thing with Will Ospreay, you know, his social media persona, his the allegations against him for the UK scene for allegedly, blackballing another wrestler and defending an alleged, rapist, one of his best friends. All these allegations are against him, and yeah, I don't want to dismiss any of that. But yeah, in the ring, he is one of the best in the world, like top 5, top 3 wrestler in the world. I guess you can argue right as of right now. We're up there with Kenny Omega, Okada, and all the others. And so yeah, definitely he is one of the best in the world. But it is what it is, I guess.
And so there are two, like, kind of, I think, key things unfolding with, in my view, of coming off of Wrestle Kingdom, with kind of the results of the main event. The first you mentioned is that Ospreay has never beaten Okada at Wrestle Kingdom. It seems like they'll probably have another match at Wrestle Kingdom, if that's the case. And New Japan's done this before. They had Okada struggle to beat Tanahashi. They had Naito struggle to beat Okada. It's kind of what they like to do when they want to build someone up, is they lose at Wrestle Kingdom a few times to the top star before eventually beating them. And the other thing that I think is really interesting, that I don't think a lot of people have kind of noticed, but Shingo has never beaten Ospreay in like these big matches, right? Ospreay beats Shingo in the Best of the Super Juniors final a few years ago. Ospreay beat Shingo for he beat Shingo in the finals of the New Japan Cup last year.
Yep.
I think, and then he beats Shingo again for the title. When he's defending the title. And so Ospreay has these 3 big wins over Shingo. And Shingo is kind of the one guy, or Ospreay is the one guy that Shingo can't really beat. So I feel like that is another kind of story coming out of this, and maybe they have a number 1 contenders match or something like that, or maybe they meet in the finals of the New Japan Cup final to set up, because that's basically a number 1 contenders match. And so I think that's another storyline coming off of this, is that Shingo needs to beat Ospreay in that kind of way to complete that story, and eventually Ospreay would need to beat Okada at Wrestle Kingdom. But those would be like the 2 kind of things I'm looking at coming off of Wrestle Kingdom from the kind of the guys in the main event.
Yeah, of course, at the end of night 2, Naito does come out to challenge Okada, so he's definitely the next challenger there. Probably just like I don't want to just dismiss it. Like it's probably gonna be a good match, but probably a filler title defense for Okada. Like I don't really see anything significant coming off of that. Maybe stuff for Shingo, since they are both Naito and Shingo are part of LIJ. But yeah, maybe just more just trying to spark up that Okada Naito rivalry over there. But yeah, that seems to be how the main event scene is going. Again, Jay White seems to be the wild card in all this. Who knows whether I don't know how many years he has left on his contract, whether it's expiring this year or not. I don't know whether he needs to figure that out first, if whether he's going to insert himself into the title scene. But he always seems like a wild card there because not sure what the official record is, but I think anecdotally it does seem like Jay White has Okada's number. Like he has some pretty significant wins over him, more so than Ospreay does, and so he's always a bit of a wild card to me in the world title scene.
Yeah, I don't know what's with Jay White. You also have Ibushi when he is ready to come back, and that was part of Wrestle Kingdom. Is that one of my main takeaways from Wrestle Kingdom, because you stretch it out over the 2 nights, not talking about night 3 because that's kind of a separate thing and the matches are wholly unique to that event. But looking at the 2 nights of Wrestle Kingdom, there's a lot of filler on these shows. There was a lot of multi-man tags, especially on night 1, that felt more like matches you would see on a Road 2 show and not like on the major events. And you obviously have a harder time bringing in foreign talents than you did previous years due to the pandemic. You lose White and Ibushi, the 2 guys who main evented Wrestle Kingdom Night 2 last year. And so that kind of made the card, I think, like I said, thinner, because you're losing 2 main eventers just like that. And it'll be interesting to see where they fit in. I mean, Ibushi is, the hope was that he was going to be ready for Wrestle Kingdom, and he wasn't. He obviously injured himself in October in the G1 final. What was his actual injury? Did he fracture his arm?
Yeah, I think it was like an arm or a shoulder injury.
Yeah, that's right. So you have that, but when he comes back, he'll presumably be ready to go and be put into a main event role. Jay White, like you said, total mystery. His contract is unclear how long he's been around. It's kind of weird he wasn't at Wrestle Kingdom. He's just kind of been doing stuff in the United States, kind of under the radar stuff. Like I know he's been around in Impact. Just kind of strange, like that we haven't seen him, especially when how big of a presence he's been in New Japan in previous years. Like I said, main evented Wrestle Kingdom Night 2. But yeah, and Naito, it wasn't like this was a huge week for Naito. He beats Jeff Cobb in a singles match, and it was a good match. But when you consider it's Wrestle Kingdom and all of your top stars should be being in huge matches, Naito really wasn't. He didn't really do a lot of things of consequence. So I think it's probably time for him to get back into the main event picture. And I don't know, I don't think it's crazy if Naito beats Okada, because we've seen this playbook before of somebody beating the Wrestle Kingdom champion right after they win the title. It happened to Naito himself. It happened to Ibushi last year. He lost the title to Ospreay. Wouldn't shock me if Naito beats Okada, just because I feel like it's in some ways kind of time to put the title, to get Naito back into being like the top star in the company, like his popularity would suggest.
Yeah, especially with it seems like from Naito, they have him a lot with the Noah sort of crossover there. It seems like LIJ seems to be the only ones promoting it or having any interactions with the Noah roster. And so I don't know if they, again, 50th anniversary, I don't know if they, Naito's champion, maybe they have a match of him and Keno, who's the national champion for Noah right now. That'd be an interesting sort of match. And mostly because I think people are entertained by the contrast in personalities with Naito and Keno. And so I think that's maybe one reason you would do that. But yeah, I mean, wouldn't be against it for having Naito beating Okada at maybe that's New Beginning or wherever what February show is going to be called.
Yeah, and so they have a part of it during Wrestle Kingdom. They announced, kind of their first half of the year schedule. Or at least like the dates of the major shows. They're doing, 2 nights at Budokan Hall for the last 2 nights of Wrestle Kingdom. They announced the New Beginning shows in Osaka, Hokkaido, and one other place I can't remember off the top of my head. But they announced, the All Japan joint show. They announced the anniversary show. They're doing so they got those 2 Budokan Hall shows. Obviously, will be anchored by the New Japan Cup, but they're running, Osaka Joe Hall 2 nights in a row. I think they've got some big shows that they're running, and they're running what's it called? They're running a big show in Fukuoka. I can't remember the name of the event that they're running, but they're running like the Fukuoka Dome. They're running like a big dome show. I want to say it's in May. I should know it. I should have had that ready, but they're running that, like they're running a stadium shows. Like they're going to be doing big shows, and you do need like big matches to main event those shows. So you do have to look at, is it going to end up being joint production show where you're going to get a champion versus champion match? I'm kind of skeptical of that, because politically, there's a reason this first Noah show is all tag team matches, where they have someone that can eat the pin in most of these matches. So in Japan, they won't have the top stars in one promotion pin the top star in another promotion. It's just not how they do business. But they do have, this big schedule for 2022. It's really ambitious. They want to do a lot of joint production shows, interpromotional shows. They're working with Noah. They're working with All Japan. It'll be interesting to see if they work with anybody else. Like, could they work with Dragon Gate? That would be kind of strange because the companies philosophically are different. But we saw them bring in like Shima, and Strong Hearts probably look like they might be around for New Japan for the junior heavyweight division for the most part. That's good. If travel restrictions change, will AEW get involved? Will we see AEW New Japan co-promoted show in Japan? I was thinking about this yesterday. I wouldn't be surprising to me if AEW did like a Dynamite taping in Japan.
That would be crazy.
Yeah, I mean they taped Dynamite in the US. I know they want it to be live, which is one of the reasons that I think they've been mostly on the East or Central time zone. But I'd be really interested in seeing, it wouldn't be crazy if they just went over for Japan and did like a taping for AEW. I don't know what kind of venue they would pick. Maybe, I don't know if it would be Korakuen Hall, maybe it would be Sumo Hall. But you could do something like that. But an AEW New Japan show would probably will happen eventually. A big thing, I think, if the pandemic and travel restrictions were different, we would have maybe gotten it already, or we might have seen more involvement between the two, outside of what we've seen so far. But it's definitely a big year. They're definitely going to have stuff planned, for it. And I'm sure the way Gato operates, he has all of that stuff planned. Now, you don't know what happens with the pandemic. We don't know what happens with injuries, but I feel like they have a really big year and they're gearing up for it. What else on this show, on either of these shows outside of the kind of main event that stood out to you at all?
First, that's the Fukuoka Peido that they're running. That's May 1st, and I guess it looks to be like Wrestling Dontaku, I guess.
Okay, so it's Dontaku, which is that's like a major show for Wrestling Dontaku. Like that's a big. I know part of it is they can't, they're not going to fill up the dome. They're not going to, it's cheaper to rent it because they have capacity restrictions and stuff like that. But it's a big event, and like I said, they announced it on Wrestle Kingdom. Like, that's going to have to be Okada versus somebody. Maybe that's where you do Okada versus Ospreay or Takagi again. You can do, I don't know, if Naito has the title at that point. Maybe Jay White comes back. Maybe Ibushi is ready and you do Okada versus Ibushi, because, that match is an easy story to do given what happened in the G1 final.
Definitely a lot of possibilities until May 1st. But for Wrestle Kingdom, I think the only other thing that stood out was the Shabbata stuff, and it's been pretty funny to read the fallout from that. People who thought it was a shoot for whatever reason. I guess, I don't know, some people, I guess there was some reporting out there that Shabbata did go in for himself, but I guess Voices of Wrestling, Joe Lanza, under their Patreon tier, I think it's the $5 tier, he sort of debunked a lot of that and gave more details on all of the Shabbata news there. But I guess we're more or less, for people who didn't see it, going into the match, it was going to be a UWF catch wrestling type of match, very similar to the one he had with Zack Sabre Jr. Back in around the G1 final. And so it was going to be similar to that. However, before the match starts, he says, "Oh no, this is a pro wrestling match now." And He goes up against Ren Narita, who was turned out to be X from the LA Dojo. And I thought they had a really fun match, especially because I don't know about you, Jesse. I don't know if you had any anxiety over watching Shibata, taking bumps or not. I can understand if some people do have that. I remember people watching Bryan Danielson for the first time. There's definitely a lot of anxiety watching him take bumps, especially when he lands on his neck or his head. People had craziness about that, but I paid attention very carefully to that. I don't really think he took that many bumps on his neck or head area, especially when Narita, like most of his offense was kicks. He didn't really go for any elbows towards Shibata's neck. It was kind of interesting to see that there, but I guess it's just more for Narita's development under the LA Dojo over there. And so I guess that could be a story unto itself over there. But yeah, I thought it was a very good match with Narita, and very good to see Shibata back again. The storyline, at least, is that Shabbata did go in for business for himself, and so I'm very curious to see what the fallout from that is for New Japan on a storyline perspective.
Right, and you kind of touched on it there. Like basically, before the match starts, Shabbata grabs the mic and says, "We're doing a rule change. This is a real match. Hope you can handle it, Narita." And so they had a really fun match. It's not like the match. It wasn't about like having this 5-star classic. It was about kind of showing Shabbata coming back, and he didn't get kicked in the head. He didn't, I don't think he didn't take like a German suplex or something that involved him around his head. So I'm still a little curious to see like how much he's come back from, but it's hard. I don't know, like you said, the storyline. Part of me thinks that what they're gonna do is he'll do a match like this, right, where he doesn't really he gets kicked in the chest and everything like that. Like, it's not like he's not taking any bumps or anything, but no one touches his head, no one gets near his head, and he'll wrestle somebody who's a heel who will like give him a German suplex or kick him in the head or something like that, and it'll be like this big heat kind of thing where Shabbata sells like he's dead and then he gets up and kills them. That's kind of where I think this is going, where it's all kind of a work. I think he's fully cleared. I think he can do whatever he wants to do. I don't believe that he went into business for himself.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Did you see what Dave wrote in the Observer about his brain surgery?
That they took out his brain and put it back in. Like more or less. That's more or less what Dave
That's what
Meltzer
he wrote.
wrote.
He said they took his brain out of his skull and had to put it back in. And I was like,
yeah,
I think that's how brain surgery works. So I don't know where Dave is getting his information, because he was also the person who said like, oh, like Shibata went into business for himself. So, but I don't know. Part of this sounds like information that's being fed to help foster the storyline, or Shibata is this crazy rebel. But
it's definitely different than Bryan Danielson sort of like whether the hyperbaric chamber thing, like that made him crazy. That's how a heel. It's definitely different than that. Again, you're like, oh, Shibata's gone crazy because his brain got taken out.
Well, I was hypothesizing that like a different brain was put in Shibata's body.
Yeah, exactly.
And that Shibata's brain is in another person's body. And I was like, can we find anyone in wrestling who's drastically changed their wrestling style over the last like year or so? Like maybe they got really into like kicking people in the chest a bunch and doing Shabbata moves and all this stuff like that, because it's just a fun. I think he mistyped something and didn't edit it out, but it was just when he wrote that. It's like so funny. It's like, okay, I don't think brain surgery works where they take your brain literally out of your head and then like put it back in. But it's one of those things. I mean, it'll be interesting to see. I think it's definitely one of the big takeaways. I think it really stunk that he didn't have the live crowd there to pop. They can just clap for Shabbata, which they did, as they clapped as furiously as they could, but it would be such a better moment if the crowd could pop and like when he said this is going to be a regular match, I'm sure the crowd would have given him like a giant reaction. It's just one of the realities of the clap crowd era in Japan. We're just not going to see that kind of crowd investment. And it hurts every match. The main events, as good as they were, would have been even better if they had a hot crowd. And it's one of those things where you just have to kind of put up with it if you're watching. But I mean, it'll be interesting to see, like, is he gonna be like a undercard guy? Is he going to be the mid-card guy? Is he going to go for titles? Is he going to be, because if he's fully back and can do anything and can have a 30-minute match, I mean, you have to think that he's going to, challenge for the world title or perhaps even win the world title. It just seems like one of those, if that's the case, but I don't know if that's the case. Really, I like to think that he's fully back, and they wouldn't have cleared him if he wasn't able to do stuff like that. But, and I'm sure he wants to do stuff like that, but I'm not sure what's going to happen to him.
Yeah, it was kind of interesting to play on this. So Shibata going rogue storyline here, because like he has the LA dojo in America, so it'd kind of be fun to see like in a strong show, like he randomly comes out, is like, oh, Jonathan Gresham or Tom Lawler, we're gonna have a match right now, and so in America you can't have that kind of pop there for the match, so it'd be kind of interesting play on that there, whether maybe New Japan, they do want those pops from a crowd, and so you could do that in America perhaps, with Shibata running the LA dojo and kind of running the strong shows as well. So that's kind of interesting to play on. Like he's going rogue in America, he's doing whatever he wants, past international borders.
So another match that to me stood out was the Tanahashi versus Kenta US title street fight, no DQ match. Really unusual to see this kind of match in Wrestle Kingdom, because Wrestle Kingdom, in previous incarnations has followed a pretty simple formula where it's like, we have a bunch of singles matches for titles. They're all straightforward singles matches. They don't do a lot of gimmick matches. And over the last 2 years during the pandemic and with different things, they've opened up the playbook. They do more gimmick matches. Obviously, they have the King of Pro Wrestling trophy, which is all gimmick matches. But this was, a second from the top major match between two of your bigger stars, and definitely one of your biggest stars in Tanahashi, for the US Championship, which is one of your, with the Intercontinental Championship going away and being merged with the IWGP World title, it's kind of like your second biggest title in the company. And instead of doing, the Tanahashi Kenta singles match, that's just like a regular match, they went with this street fight concept. And, at first it was kind of just your generic brawl, but these guys absolutely gave it their all. Kenta gets this ladder that's like this huge, I don't know, it's probably like 15 feet high, maybe, I don't know.
Yeah,
he sets up this big ladder, and it takes him forever to set it up. He's got to it's got basically a separate frame that he has to attach to the ladder to make sure it to stand up properly. And he's screwing in all these knobs, and Tanahashi's got to lay on this table like he's dead. And so Kenta climbs the ladder, and Tanahashi gets off the table as Kenta nears the top and just shakes the ladder. The ladder looks like it's going to completely collapse and fall into like a million pieces. And Tanahashi doesn't tip the ladder over. Kenta just kind of pratfalls off of it.
Yeah.
And he gets messed up on this pratfall. I don't know. There's a whole list of injuries that he has from this match. And he's off the Noah show, which is actually too bad because he was kind of a pivotal figure, because he was on Team Noah as like the New Japan double agent almost. But he does this pratfall where he lands on a chair or something like that, gets messed up. Tanahashi picks him up, puts him on the table, and then Tanahashi climbs to the top of the ladder. I think he was second rung from the top, and stands up and does a high fly flow through the Japanese the Japanese table, which is very hard to break. It's not like a one of the American worked tables. And not only that, but a lot of times when you see guys do a splash from the top rope or from the top of a ladder, they kind of just jump off and protect themselves a little bit and don't do their full signature move. I always remember Rob Van Dam, WrestleMania 22, he was in the Money in the Bank match, and he stands on the very top of the ladder and he's doing the 5-star frog splash, but instead of doing the full 5-star frog splash, he just kind of fell down gracefully so he didn't die doing his full move from 12 feet in the air. Tanahashi does not care. He does a full high fly flow, full extension off of the ladder. It looked amazing. He crashes, he puts Kenta through the table. this was like an awesome finish. And it was so weird to see it at New Japan, like I said, because they don't do a lot of matches like this, especially in a match that's second from the top. Tanahashi with his knees and his various injuries over the years, the fact that he was willing to do that is incredible. Kenta has like, let me find the full list of Kenta's injuries.
Oh,
Now,
ever here.
you do? Oh, yeah, read it.
On the New Japan website, it says he sustained a dislocated left hip, a broken nose, tendon damage to his finger, and severe lacerations to his back.
Yeah, so maybe some of that could be worked, but
they don't seem out of the ordinary though.
No,
from the kind of fall he took.
When the match was over, I was like a little bit worried. I'm like, oh man, I hope these guys are okay.
Yeah.
Which honestly is like the sign of a good street fight. You don't want it to be crazy where it's like, oh my God, I think that guy died. But you do want to be like, wow, these guys did crazy stuff. I'm worried. Part of me is worried for their real personal safety, with good reason, apparently, because Kenta's got a laundry list of injuries. And I can't imagine, like, he's a wrestler, so it's like a totally different pain threshold. But like, if I have one like injury, like my back's bothering me, or my knee is bothering me, or my shoulder, I'm like, this hurts. Like, it bothers me. I can't imagine having like 6 different injuries, but that's probably why I'm not a pro wrestler.
Yeah, it's kind of ironic that Tanahashi's doing all this, because I remember, I believe it was Wrestle Kingdom 12 or so when he took on Kenny Omega. And during the build-up of that match, he was like sort of scolding Omega for like all these hardcore matches that he was bringing to New Japan, and how like that was sort of the storyline. Kenny Omega was sort of the hardcore. He bring in the tables and stuff, and Tanahashi's more of the traditionalist for New Japan. But now it seems to have flipped. Now Tanahashi now doing more of these more hardcore street fight type of deals, bringing in ladders now. But yeah, it was one of the highlights of the Wrestle Kingdom for a very sparse sort of card, and so it definitely stood out amongst the others of the other most of the tag matches, like you said, filler matches over there. And I wanted to look up like whether Kenta did anything of ladders in WWE. I guess from what I can tell, he has never done anything of ladders in WWE, so it's kind of hilarious that he's now doing these kind of matches in New Japan, out of all places.
Yeah, like I said, it's very atypical. And we had the King of Pro Wrestling. They had the 4-way match on night 2 as well, which I would say, like, the King of Pro Wrestling stuff, it's really dumb. Like, the Yano stuff is really dumb, but given the restrictions of the pandemic and the clap crowds, I've actually starting to grow on me. Like I actually really like the amateur wrestling match Yano and Okan had for it, just because great. They went for it. Like, they came out, they had the amateur referee, they had the full get up, they had the point system. I think Marty Asami was refereeing. He had like the flags to indicate like a point. You had the quarterman. Like, they had the scoreboard and the timer. Like, they just went for it. And it was just like, okay, is this classic New Japan Pro Wrestling? Is this what people expect when they turn on New Japan Pro Wrestling? No. But it is entertaining in its own way. And it's the uniqueness is starting to grow on me. It'll be interesting to see with Suzuki having the title, because Suzuki, everyone thinks of him as like this, he's Minoru Suzuki. He's the most serious, angry wrestler in the world. He's no fun. Like, he's just like this crazy badass and maniacal evil person. But Suzuki has like serious comedy wrestling chops, and he can do a lot, and he can almost balance some comedic stipulations with like serious pro wrestling matches. So I mean,
just a couple of days ago, he was on a DDT show teaming with Maki Ito and Chris Brooks.
Yes,
and so that shows his comedy chops there.
Yeah, like he's the guy. He's the guy who's wrestled robots. He wrestled the empty Tokyo Dome show DDT match. Like, this is someone with it's like a lot of comedic wrestling experience. So I'm actually, as I can't believe I'm saying this, but like, I'm actually interested in seeing what happens with the King of Pro Wrestling trophy, just because it's starting to grow on me as far as diversity. I thought on night 1, like I said, a lot of filler tag matches, a lot of multi-man tags set up matches later in the show. or for the following night. But the night 2, I liked that they had more singles matches that had like real feuds going into them, because that's something that happens with New Japan, is that they don't really book a lot of regular normal singles matches. Single matches either have to be for a title or they're involved in some form of tournament. There's not really a lot of just, oh, here are two guys that are feuding and they're going to have a singles match. Everything is usually like, well, there has to be some sort of overarching reason for them to have a match. Like it's part of a tournament, or someone's the champion and the other person is the number 1 contender. But on night 2, we had Jeff Cobb versus Naito. We had Okan versus Sonata. These matches that were good. They weren't like amazingly great matches, but they were just like, okay, here are guys who have had a rivalry, who have, now having this big match at Wrestle Kingdom. And I appreciate that. It seems, it's like I said, it's different than in years past. In years past, you would have maybe one match like that, but a lot of times it would just be filled out with all of these various titles. Like every match would be a title match at Wrestle Kingdom, because you'd have the tag team titles, the junior tag titles, the never open 6-weight champions. You'd have the never championship, the Intercontinental Championship, the US Championship, the IWGP Heavyweight Championship, the Junior Heavyweight Championship. Maybe they throw on the ROH title or the Rev Pro British Championship. Like every match would just be a championship match. And you don't need to do that, if you're New Japan. And I like to see these guys have singles matches just because they have singles matches, and not necessarily need to be beholden to, it either has to be a title match, or if we don't have a title or a tournament, then it's just going to be like a 6-man tag match. I like that more on night 2 than as opposed to night 1, which just seemed like they needed to put some matches on there to kill some time.
Yeah, it's definitely more the pro wrestling side of things. Like I think New Japan, like the whole titles thing, I think it's just more of a sports based kind of booking. Like, like UFC, like, whenever guys like don't fight for a title, it's not like they're feuding for whatever reason. That's usually just them trying to rise in the rankings or become a number 1 contender for the title eventually. And so definitely, I think that's sort of the reason for their booking is the sports based kind of a thing. The big matches are the title matches most often. Even like Masvidal and Nick Diaz, when they had their big fights, they actually had a feud going on there. They had to make up a random title, the BMF title. It's a random arbitrary title over there, like kind of like New Japan does with the KOPW title, because just can't have comedy matches just for the sake of comedy matches. They have to be for a title. But definitely I do like that it gives more people things to do rather than just chase for titles. Just for faction warfare or just for bragging rights or anything like that. Should mention that Jeff Cobb also suffered an injury as well. So definitely it's unfortunate that he's going to be probably off for a couple of months or so. I believe it was a knee injury that he suffered. And so it's very unfortunate there, but despite it being a very good match they had with Naito.
Yeah, it's one of those things. And like, it makes sense, because then you have Naito come out at the end of Wrestle Kingdom and he's like, I want the title. And you at least had the credibility of saying, well, Naito did win a big singles match earlier in the night. So in wrestling terms, that does put him in line to become a credible challenger and to have earned the number 1 contender spot in a certain way. But yeah, it's one of those things where it's like, New Japan, and I said this after night 1, and I kind of stand by it, but I understand that you can look at it differently. Like they get rid of the Intercontinental Championship, right? It's just gone, which I don't really know why they did it, but they chose to do it. So that's out of the picture. And then the never openweight championship is basically ruined by Evil being involved in the House of Torture, and just they had a nothing boring match with Tomohiro Ishii, which should be a crime, having a terrible match with Ishii at Wrestle Kingdom, but House of Torture gets away with it again. So basically, never open weight championship is not going to get it done anymore. You don't have the Intercontinental Championship, so then you're relying on basically the junior title, the world title, and the US title to be like your singles championships that are going to have really good singles matches with, and that's only 3. And New Japan usually has a lot more than that. So part of me was like, well, I wish they'd just bring back the Intercontinental Championship so we'd have a reason to have another good singles match on one of these shows. But realistically, as we saw in night 2, you don't necessarily have to have a title. You can just have guys feud, and it can be like that. And I know that's not how it's typically been in New Japan. A lot of other promotions follow kind of a similar philosophy, but I think it really benefits everyone. And like you said, it changes things up. It gives guys something to do. I think like we saw it with Okada kind of, being out of the world title picture for a few years. It can be tough because if you're at the top star and you're being counted on to main event all of these shows for like years on end, like someone like Okada or Tanahashi is, you're going to end up, being the champion for a while, or when you're not the champion, you're the number one contender, or you're challenging for the title, and you can get stale that way because you're just always around the title mix for years and years and years. You need to find something else to do with your life without being in the world title picture. And like I said, if you have more flexibility when it comes to making singles matches that are important, that aren't necessarily for the title, that's good. And I think that can add a lot of benefits to New Japan.
Yeah, for sure, 100%. Other than that, was there anything else that stood out for you for Wrestle Kingdom? I mean, the junior title match, it was fine, established Desperado as a top champion, but other than that, it wasn't really the best match of their rivalry with Hiromu. And the starter match, at least it was on the main card, but other than that, it was just more of another showcase type of match, just like the show, like, oh, hey, watch Stardom, this is what you get if you watch Stardom. There's nothing else to that match. I don't know if anything else stood out for you in Wrestle Kingdom.
Yeah, I mean, the starting match being on the main card is a little bit interesting in that they're kind of like progressing a little bit further with how they use Stardom, right? It was originally Stardom was a dark match.
Yep.
And then it was, I think it was like a dark match. Nobody, like, it wasn't even on the pre-show. Like, no one even saw that match unless you were in the building.
Yep.
And this year, they've progressed to being on the main show. And I'll be interesting to see what they do going forward. I mean, will Stardom be on shows that aren't just Wrestle Kingdom? I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if they were around for more major shows. Would we see a title defense in a Stardom match eventually, or will it continue to just be these showcase matches? I think that's an interesting element. We talked about New Japan this year. They want to work with more promotions. They want to be interpromotional. Stardom is a little different because they have the same, they're both owned by Bushiroad, so it's there's no real political aspects of it that would make it difficult to pull it off. It just comes down to, will the New Japan fan base, will they accept Stardom? Do they want to see women's wrestling on the show? Will some of the hardcore Stardom fans be fans of New Japan if they're doing this? I think that's all remains to be seen, but I am interested, and I thought they had a really good match. I mean, I think they only got about 10 minutes. I thought it was interesting that it wasn't necessarily like, Mayu Iwatani was on it, but it wasn't Julia, it wasn't Utami, it wasn't Shuri, it wasn't like their four biggest stars. They kind of used some of their, younger stars, up and coming stars, in addition to Iwatani, as far as like, they didn't show you like, they didn't give away like their biggest match. They didn't give away their biggest stars, really. They just kind of had, here are four people we think that are going to be good. We're going to throw them out there and they're going to do stuff, as opposed to like, oh, okay, we're going to give you like our biggest match. We're going to do Utami versus Shuri, for the title at Wrestle Kingdom, which a lot of promotions would approach it like that. It would be like, let's have our biggest, most important match at this moment because it's when the most people are going to be watching us.
Yeah, for sure. I think the strategy for the Stardom match was just getting more high flyers and just more just people who do like exciting, crazy moves. And obviously Sai Kamitani has the Phoenix Splash, and so that's definitely very impressive looking there. And so I think that's just more the motivation there, rather having more your technical wrestlers like Ishiri, watching just people grapple. I guess they don't want to just showcase that. They want to show more the high flyers like Iwatani, Starlight Kid, and such there. And so I think that's the motivation there. But yeah, for sure, with the All Japan sort of partnership, that's kind of interesting because, was it Jake Lee? I think he's injured right now. And so their main title is vacant at the moment. I believe. I haven't seen the recent
No,
show.
I think Kento is the champion, I think.
I looked up. Is it Jake Lee?
Jake Lee vacated the championship. And, Jake Lee got the push of his life, and then formed his own faction, and then he wins the title, and then he gets hurt. Yeah. So then he vacated. Oh no, it is vacated.
And yes, that's kind of interesting there, All Japan, because they're sort of very lagging behind as Noah is sort of gaining more momentum, especially with the partnership with with Cyber Agent acquiring Noah, and so now like they're part of the whole. I guess they rebranded the DT Universe streaming app into Wrestle Universe, so that you have pretty much DDT and Noah on the same streaming service, and so I'm sure that's helped out Noah's exposure a lot more. Definitely, getting more, sort of mainstream type of press, and Sports Illustrated as well helps as well. So more people know who Nakajima is, who Keno and Go Shiozaki are. And so it definitely helps them out.
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to compare it to, I think All Japan stinks. I
Yeah.
really like Kento Miyahara. They have done an absolutely wretched job in building people around Miyahara that can also be like credible main eventers. They seem tied between young guys who they give half-hearted pushes to, or old guys who physically aren't at that level anymore.
Like Suwama.
Yeah, and like Suwama's good if he can just stand there and lay in his offense. But if you
Yeah.
need him to sell and bump, which you would if he's going to have like a 30-minute world title match, it's one of those things. You just gotta like get past, and it does feel like, and from a business perspective, it's reflected in the kind of crowds that they draw. Noah has. I don't want to say Noah. Like Noah has. They were probably closer to equals a few years ago, and it does feel like Noah has pulled away, impressively so. During the pandemic, they did. I think I have no use for the Kichimuto stuff. I think it's awful. But if you just take that away, and he has helped draw on a certain occasion, so from a business perspective, it makes sense. But if you just take Muto away, like the top guys in Noah are just way better than the top guys in All Japan outside of Miyahara. Like you just look at, like you said, Nakajima and Tagashi Segura and Go Shiozaki, who's back after, he missed a lot of the last year with the injury. He's back. Keno, like Kiyomiya, like they just have like a really good top group of talent. And I feel like they can almost match New Japan in a lot of ways. New Japan's guys are bigger stars, but you can have like Nakajima versus Okada, and it doesn't feel like a crazy mismatch between two guys who are on two different levels. I feel like they're fairly close, which is really impressive when you consider how good Okada is. But yeah, it's just one of those things where it's like, I don't like, yeah, you're right. The All Japan show is intriguing from like a historical perspective because it's their oldest rival. It's, New Japan and All Japan spent so many decades fighting each other. And they also had joint shows at certain times too, when business was bad, but they're just, since I've been watching, Japanese pro wrestling, they've been on just so totally different levels when it comes to popularity. That All Japan is kind of like this old dying brand that's totally different than where it was, in its heyday. And New Japan is the undisputed leader in that space in Japan. It'll be interesting to see what they do with the shows. It seems like, will it be something like Noah? Will they go as hard with like it's all our guys that I loved the segment of Wrestle Kingdom with all the Noah guys marching out in their different track suits.
Yeah.
Like basically saying like why Kano cuts his heel promo where he's just like, why are there so many seats being empty at this building? You guys need our help. You guys suck. Los Ingobernables de Japan come out and say like, hey, shut up. We don't suck. And then Kano goes, well, why don't you come in the ring and say that to my face? And there's like 40 people and Noah in the ring, and LIJ is, I think it's just Bushi and Hiromu behind him. So he doesn't get in the ring because he's not an idiot babyface, but I don't know if they're going to do that kind of angle with All Japan. I don't know. I'd be interested. Like, I think you can get more out of a long-term Noah versus New Japan program because you have so many different top guys that can feud with other top guys than I think you could with New Japan and like All Japan.
Yeah, definitely. Like, I know it is accurate to say that New Japan is kind of on a down period right now for various reasons, but you're comparing that down period to what, like 6-10 years ago compared to All Japan, whose down period was like the last down period was what, like 30 years ago in the 90s. And so I think that's the big discrepancy there, that like New Japan's down period is just very new and very relatively from the past couple of years. All Japan has been on a down period for the last 30 years.
Yeah, I would say, when Misawa leaves and forms Noah, in 2001. That's like the start of all. And they had already been kind of in decline from their heyday in the mid 90s, but
Yeah.
that's like the start. And it's like I said, it's a totally different company. Like it's basically an indie in Japan. Like they'll do a good show. We'll do like 1,200 people. A lot of the shows doing less. Getting back to New Japan a little bit. Like you said, you pointed out the Hiromu versus El Desperado match. You know, I don't think El Desperado is bad, but it's hard to look at him and look at some of the junior heavyweight champions we've become accustomed to seeing, in recent years, whether you can obviously Hiromu, and you can look at some of Hiromu's rivals. You can look at Dragon Lee, Will Ospreay, Marty Scurll, Kushida. I don't know, was Kyle O'Reilly ever junior heavyweight champion?
Don't think so. Only the tag champion.
Yeah. But like, if you want to go further back, Kenny Omega, Prince Devitt, like El Desperado is just not at those guys levels. And it seems kind of hard. Like, I understand like it's good. He got, like you said, he defended the title at Wrestle Kingdom. So it's not like a crowning of him, but it was kind of like an affirmation that he's like an equal to Hiromu, which I don't think anyone really bought. And I just don't see him at the level. And I look across the junior heavyweight division and I'm like, there's just not, it's a lot of older guys that have limited ceilings, like, Rocky Romero, Ryusuke Taguchi, Tiger Mask. And I just don't see a ton of like potential, like top, even like Ishimori, who's really, really good, like just doesn't feel like a top guy because he's kind of been slotted in as like a kind of like a mid-card guy who wrestles in a lot of like 6-man tag matches. And you can only do Hiromu versus Ishimori so many times. I'd like to see them do more with El Phantasmo than they do, but he seems like, again, more of a tag guy and not as much of a singles guy. I just feel like the junior division is kind of in a down period when it comes to top end talent. And I wonder if working with other promotions can change that. I think bringing in Strong Hearts creates a whole new dynamic. If that's the case, if you're going to use some of the junior heavyweights and some of these other companies, obviously, again, I don't know how a Dragon Gate New Japan interpromotional match would work, but if you did keep it to the Super Juniors or the junior division, it would work because you would have a lot more access to those guys. I think it would be really interesting if AEW sent some guys over to the junior division. I would personally find it way more interesting, just from a curiosity standpoint, to see someone like Dante Martin or even a more established person like Sammy Guevara go over there and work in New Japan's junior division. It just seems to me like just the depth isn't quite there, and I'd like to see it be shaken up a little bit. We saw, I think Master Wato got the submission victory at Wrestle Kingdom over Desperado, which I think was on the pre-show, but it seemed like Master Wato is being set up as the next challenger. But like Master Wato versus El Desperado is like a big step down from like Will Ospreay versus Kushida or something, or Ricochet versus Kushida or something like that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, Robbie Eagles right now, he's the current junior heavyweight tag team champion, former champion himself. I think there's kind of interesting potential in him. I kind of feel like this Tiger Mask partnership is maybe made just a way to get a more baby face rub for the Japanese audience, because since he was out for a while during the pandemic, he was kind of just more in the Australian kind of scene over there. And so I don't know if that's the reason why he's tag teaming with Tiger Mask right now, rather than just competing for his title again for Desperado. And so maybe it just may get more acquainted with the Japanese audience, getting that babyface rub from Tiger Mask. But yeah, Robbie Eagles is definitely someone to look out for me. Jonathan Gresham right now, he last competed in the best of the Super Juniors, and so they definitely see him as a junior type of wrestler, and so he'd be kind of interesting if they could get access to him. But yeah, again, no travel restrictions definitely did play a part in that, but he'd be a very interesting guy in that junior heavyweight division, especially with the work he's been doing this past couple of years.
Yeah, there's guys who could, like I said, a big thing is the pandemic. The junior division has always relied on having some key foreigners involved, and El Phantasmo's there, Rocky's there, Robbie Eagles is there, so they do have those guys. But yeah, someone like a Jonathan Gresham and being able to bring him in would make a big difference. You could, Dragon Lee, you could always bring him back. Bandito, another
Yeah.
guy. To me, it's all about like, it's can they bring in a few more guys that would make that would shake things up and make things more interesting on that end. Gresham, he's worked strong tapings, hasn't he?
Yeah, he's worked strong tapings, but
Yeah.
but again, like right now, he's got his own promotion of Terminus. I don't know whether AEW has had any contact with him or not since Ring of Honor sort of dissolved, and so yeah, I'm just not sure about his current status or whether he's looking to sign somewhere or whether he wants to go back to New Japan proper or not. But yeah, he's definitely had some strong matches as of late.
Yeah, so he's definitely someone that I would look at as being able to bring him in. And just kind of liven things up. Yeah, Robbie Eagles, he wins the junior tag title with Tiger Mask. Yeah, it just feels like a placeholder for him. It's good for Tiger Mask to get a title again. I do think one important storyline that I think this is probably the time I do it, given again, because it's not like there's a ton going on right now, is you do have the storyline where Rocky has never won the junior title. He's mentioned how like if he wants to he's going to retire if he doesn't win the title. He's kind of mentioned that in passing, and I do think now would be a good time to do a Rocky Romero is going to retire if he doesn't win the title kind of stipulation. And I think that would actually be a really good thing to do on like if you're going to come back and do like a big New Japan US show. I know they have a few on the date right now, but that would be like something that I would look in for interest. I'd be interested in doing if you're going to like have a main event or something like that. Would be like, let's do the Rocky Romero puts his career on the line to win the title match. And then I think he wins the title, obviously. But I think that would be something you could do that would make me personally more interested in the junior heavyweight division than I currently am. And like I said, it's not like Desperado and obviously Hiromu, they're not bad. It just kind of feels stale. And I think they need to get that talent level up a little bit more across the division because New Japan had this habit of, okay, if we have a really talented junior who's like at least passably big enough to pass as a heavyweight, we're going to move them up to the heavyweight division. So you have guys like, Ospreay going up to the heavyweight division, Shingo going up to the heavyweight division. You can go further back and look at like Prince Devitt and Kenny.
Or Bushi.
Yeah, Bushi. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, I forgot about him. Like, yeah, just like kind of this thing where it's like, oh, if you're big, you'll go to the heavyweight division. And a lot of people think Hiromu should be going up to the heavyweight division, and he's really not that big, but you can get away with it because he has that kind of star presence. But that does kind of leave the division with a lot of guys who are either too small or too old or not good enough to be heavyweights. And so I do wonder I do think they need to inject some new life into that. And there's a lot of options you can do with that. Like we mentioned them here.
Yeah, I mean, just looking at future strong shows, they have like the couple ones this weekend with Nemesis on Saturday. You have strong tapings on January 15th. They have the LA show on Hollywood February 17th. That's be kind of interesting sort of place. They have Strong Style Evolved in Tampa, and so those are just kind of interesting venues for Rocky to win that title. And if he does win that title, if they do that storyline, he seemingly knows everyone in the wrestling industry, and so he can just bring that title around everywhere in the wrestling industry in America. It'd be kind of interesting sight to see that junior title just in random indie shows.
Yeah, like I said, it's definitely something that I would. It seems like they're teasing it a little bit. It haven't gone full bore on it yet, but it would be something that I would look at, especially now. What do you have to lose? Like, is that Master Wato versus El Desperado match really like? Is that's what you're doing instead of this? I guess like I would say like now would be the time to do it. If you had like, because the whole reason Rocky has never gotten the junior heavyweight title, it's just because it's always been a little bit above his level when it comes to like star power. Like it's always been like, oh, that's something that Kushida and Kota Ibushi and Kenny Omega and Prince Devitt and these guys like, and Rocky just wasn't at that level as a star. But now it feels like more within his reach, and I think that's a great story. It kind of is like, it reminds me of like what Christopher Daniels won the Ring of Honor World Championship. It was like this story was that he never won the world title and he wanted to win one, and it was this veteran in that way he became a big enough star to win the title credibly. And I think you can do that with Rocky. And I think that's a story that they should really be looking at doing in 2022. Is there anything else you have on Wrestle Kingdom or New Japan that we haven't gotten to yet?
I think just one thing to add in the junior discussion, Del Desperado did tease a match for El Lindemann, and so that could be a match in the future as well. So you already mentioned Strong Hearts, but yeah, I mean that's already just out in the universe that El Desperado kind of wants to face El Lindemann, and that'd be a very fun match there.
Yeah, it does seem like Strong Hearts is going to be around for a while. It's, they're freelancers. They're not, I guess they were presented as being from GLEAT in the on television. At least that's what Chris Charlton said. But they're freelancers. They can go pretty much anywhere. And it does seem to, like I said, talking about junior heavyweight, needing to bring in some more people that maybe liven things up. It seems like Strong Hearts is a no-brainer, and I'm glad that we're getting there. But that's pretty much it. I think we kind of summarized everything I had to say about Wrestle Kingdom and New Japan right now, but we're excited. It should be an exciting 22, hopefully a better 22 from a COVID perspective. And I know it says that, I know saying that now, it sounds kind of crazy, but in some ways we're closer. I do feel like we're closer to the end of the tunnel than we are at the start. But hopefully, should be a big 2022 for New Japan, hopefully a big 2022 for all of wrestling. And like I said, it's off to a great start from a match perspective. Just hope to see continue to keep up with, having big shows, having matches that feel important, and that end across the wrestling spectrum.
Yep, right on. Same here. Hopefully good things for all of wrestling, and got good matches. Hopefully, things keep going well with bigger shows. Hopefully, again, hopefully things line up a little bit for Japan to open up just slightly a bit more. Hopefully, the end of the clap crowds, at least for wrestling, at least. I've seen other things have clap crowds like concerts and stuff. That's obviously very different than wrestling. Wrestling needs a crowd, and so hopefully the clap crowds do end, especially as these bigger shows come up for New Japan.
Yeah, for sure. And hopefully, and I believe they started to make some progress in Japan as far as expanding like crowd capacity. I think they gave I think it was I don't know if it may have changed since Omicron became more prominent, but there was something like you could either go up to full capacity, no cheering, or half capacity and cheering. I mean, obviously that hasn't been the case because at Wrestle Kingdom they had well under half capacity for the Tokyo Dome, and and still no cheering. But it might be something that might come into play. It might make the atmosphere a little bit more lively in Japan, and that'll be good because, like I said, the product's really good at a lot of portions of it. The clap crowds can make it tough at times, so taking that away from the product will probably be a big benefit.
Yep, 100%. Hopefully sooner rather than later.
So that's going to do it for us. We will see you guys again in 2 weeks. Probably something crazy will happen between now and then. We could have talked about the NXT releases. We could have talked about AEW on TBS. We could talk about Hangman Page. Could talk about COVID in wrestling. But I'm probably happy we talked about New Japan, honestly, instead of anything else. So we'll be back in 2 weeks, and we thank everyone who's been listening in. Hope everyone had a good, safe holiday and is still staying safe. And we will see you guys in a few weeks.